Hello, hello, hello. I am Matt Williamson, and it was -8 when I woke up this morning. It's freezing here on a Wednesday. You'll be probably listening to this on a Thursday, but all this is going to hold up, and this is a conversation we've been wanting to have, and a lot of you have been asking me about, and this is not my final answer, but I do want to talk Steelers quarterbacks, and let's get a couple of things out of the way. I am not in on Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers at all. There are two things that are appealing about those guys. I just want to make sure you guys are aware is if you would go the Cousins route, and I have a strong feeling he's going to end up in Cleveland, the only way to even consider it is not trading for him with Atlanta, is Atlanta cuts him and you sign him to the Russell Wilson league minimum deal. Because someone's going to get that benefit with Cousins. He looks pretty beat to me. I mean, he couldn't move at the end, so that doesn't interest me. But that part is intriguing about the contract, much like it was with Wilson. That's kind of a gift. Rodgers, to me, has just not adapted from old school Bill Walsh, West Coast. He's a big personality. I don't think that makes any sense at all. But I'd really like Devontae Adams to be a Steeler. And if Rodgers decides to play football again, which I have a hunch he's going to retire, if you could bring them both in, that's appealing to me, but not really. I'd rather just try to get Adams by myself. So those two I want to get out of the way. You could get those guys for peanuts, but boy, they're old, and we kind of just did that with Wilson, you know what I'm saying? As for free agents, it's a terrible, terrible quarterback class for free agents. Frankly, Fields and Wilson might be the second and third best options behind Sam Darnold. And I'm sure many of you watched those last two games and said, Darnold stinks, he turned into a pumpkin. I don't think that's true. I think he would be an upgrade over anyone the Steelers have had since Ben's elbow surgery. I think there's a lot of talent there. I think he's an ascending player. I don't know that the Steelers would get the most out of him like Minnesota did, but I also think he's going to be pretty darn expensive, and teams like the Raiders are going to be really hard to outbid for him. But I think you have to have that conversation. Now, does that mean he's going to compete with Lamar and Burrow? Compete's a big word. He's not as good as those guys. He probably never will be. I'm sure he won't be. But I do think he doesn't cost you a pick. He just eats up cap space. I would be intrigued with Sam Darnold, I think, more than the public seems to be. Now, I got pretty good word that that's not the direction the Steelers are going to go, and I 100% understand that. Trust me, I do. One name I want to throw out there that I've heard no one talk about, and I don't even know if it's possible, is Geno Smith. The Seahawks, and remember yesterday we talked about, resources and how the ability to get better. Well, other than the Saints, who are always horrible with cap stuff, Seattle is a mess. Now, they don't really have an in-house quarterback, to groom. Howe probably isn't that guy, although I know they like him. But they have big cap issues, and frankly, this brings me to DK Metcalf, but that's a story for another day. I think Metcalf has a really good chance to move this year, and that would interest me. But maybe Geno. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are like, is that even any better than what we played with last year? Yes, it is. He's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the entire league. He is aggressive. He's highly accurate. He's played behind horrendous offensive lines the last couple of years. He's an elevator. That would be something I would be really interested in. I don't know that I don't think there's any legs to this. I'm just looking at potential trade candidates. I didn't even throw Derek Carr in the mix because I just don't think that moves the needle for me enough, but we'll throw that name too. But teams that you could pry away their quarterback, Carr and Geno are the two that are at least options are worth calling about. And Geno makes you a better football team. Trust me on that one. Maybe it doesn't psych you up, but I very much believe that to be true. He is a very good player. Maybe the 10th, 11th best quarterback in the league, something like that. And most people don't look at him in that light. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action, the ability to watch the games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA to college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. So, of course, here's the main event. Comes down to probably Wilson versus Fields. Is there a world where they could bring them both back? Yeah, I think that's not the craziest thing and have even more of a competition. But I think they don't know this answer yet, but I think, well, who knows? Maybe they do, but I think that they're still having ongoing talks, pleading both sides of the case. What's the better option between the two? Neither's perfect, that's for sure. And frankly, this is a bad situation to be in. I don't like any option. I don't love any option. Darnold and Geno are the two that would make you make you a better football team. But is that wise considering what they would cost and all that stuff too? Now, Fields is 11 years younger than Wilson. We're just going to stick with this. He's only 25. I know that the team likes both human beings and the work ethic and the teammates and all that stuff. So character isn't a detriment to either. But Wilson has been around the block more and is definitely better at the line of scrimmage and things of that nature. Field still worries me with procedural stuff. I don't know that nothing's ever as clean, but you would hope that gets polished up. But I also think Wilson showed a lot of limitations down the stretch, and defensive coordinators liked playing against him. You keep him in the pocket. He has a hard time seeing. He doesn't throw over the middle. You do your best to take away the moon balls or whatever. His numbers versus zone are quite poor, to be honest with you. And so they got more and more zone. That was part of the thing that happened down the stretch is defensive coordinators, they're pretty smart, started figuring out that if we do a lot of zone stuff, he's not going to be as successful. For example, and I don't 100% trust zone man splits, whenever Next Gen or whatever gives them to him. But according to Next Gen, that Eagles game, they didn't play one snap of man coverage, all zone. Every time. And we saw how the Steelers and Wilson struggled. What he's never been is a progression reader. 1 to 2 to 3. It's more of pre-snap. If it's not there, we'll figure it out. And I don't think that's ever going to change. But he has good traits as well. Again, knowing where the blitz is coming from, been around the block. I was all for switching to him when they did in the season. And for the most part, that looked like the right decision. However, if it were up to me, I think I would go with Fields. Now, here's why. The youth thing is 100%. That's a lot. He's going to have a cheaper contract. I'm guessing Fields could be had for 2 years, $25 million, with a lot of incentives in there. Playing time, Pro Bowls, playoffs, whatever. Wilson, to me, is probably 1 year 30 or 2 years 60, something like that. So noticeably more. Which then allows you to sign 2 more starters or whatever, Now, it also doesn't fill out your quarterback room with either one of them. Who are the backups for these guys? But I think that's more important for Fields. Fields has an extensive injury history. I don't think he's ever played an entire season, start to finish. He puts himself in harm's way a lot more in terms of a runner and taking hits. His floor is lower. He could be a disaster, which I'll talk about in a minute here. But I also think, partially because Wilson was injured when Fields was starter, that they kept a governor on Fields. They never really unleashed his full athletic spectrum, we'll call it. We don't want him taking too many hits. We don't want to go to Allen mid-game. Wilson's not an option. So I don't know that I know that Steeler fans have not seen the heights that Fields can provide as a runner, as a featured player of an offense. And I've said this over and over and over, and I'm going to keep saying it all offseason, that the Steelers we know are going to be a high volume running team. Well, you can't average 4 yards a carry like they did this year. That needs to get to 4.3, 4.4, whatever. It needs to go up drastically. And Fields would help that immensely. Just a really good running quarterback in general just always raises team yards per carry. So that gives him a nice leg up. I mean, I would run him a lot. I don't think he's as good a passer, but I also don't think his book is as written as Wilson's either. Again, I'm not telling you things you don't know. But if you get Fields, you better have a pretty solid backup and somebody of a similar ilk. Like, I know this name's not exciting either, but hey, I could drag Trey Lance to camp and see what he has. Again, there's not many names you're going to like hearing. It's a bad situation, folks. But I lean towards Fields. And frankly, if he's horrific, maybe you end up 7-win team, 8-win team, 6-win team. And you're in striking distance of your next quarterback then. That's not tanking. The Steelers would never do that. But I don't know that it would be a horrible result if we're having this conversation a year from now and being like, the Fields experiment didn't really work. They have the 10th pick in the draft. There's 4 good quarterbacks in this class. Maybe they could stick there and get one of them, or move up 2 spots and get one of them, or go crazy and go all the way to 1. I know that's not usually their style. But I think you have to look at that in that light. How can you get a difference-making quarterback? And this brings me to the last thing I want to talk about is I know this quarterback class isn't great, and I'm very early in my draft prep, but I would have no problem using a reasonably early pick on somebody in this class, preferably an athlete. And if that guy doesn't work out, take one next year. Like if you took Milroe out of Alabama is the one I keep coming back to. And he's really, really athletic. He's super unpolished, blah, blah, blah. But if he looks terrible, you draft one next year. Just keep drafting quarterbacks. Is the big picture here is Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, they weren't the first pick in the draft. You can strike gold in the later pick. So this is a terrible, messy situation. This is not my final answer. It's really not even a good answer, folks. I'm sorry, but I think what I would do is make Fields basically my undisputed 2-year contract starting quarterback. Doesn't mean he has to start every game for 2 years. He could get unseated easily. Keep my options open, certainly through the draft and trade possibilities. And as I always like to say, build the nest for the next guy too. And by that, I mean, take the extra 10 to 20 million you have because you signed Fields, not Wilson, and give it to a receiver. Give it to an extra offensive lineman. Whatever it is. Just make Fields' life easier, but also the next guy, if Fields fails, life easier as a draftable incoming quarterback. It's messy, folks. It's really messy, but that's what I'm leaning towards here near the end of January. Running it back with Wilson, I would understand. I just kind of think we've seen that answer by now, and it doesn't strike fear in the opponent. All right, take care, everyone.